Stevie Goddamn Wonder. Musical genius, multi-instrumentalist, singer-songwriter, producer, national treasure. Alright, I think I'm done glazing this, man. Stevie really is one of the most influential and important figures in American music, though, and has an incredible discography full of absolute classics just about anyone can recognize. The average music fan would probably recognize him for his most popular singles like Superstition or For Once in My Life, or his groundbreaking and absolutely classic magnum opus, Songs in the Key of Life, which is generally regarded as not only his best album, one of the best albums ever made, and I honestly gotta agree. There are 21 songs in this record and they're all hits. They're all masterpieces, so it's no surprise that this album is considered his best and is still discussed extensively to this day. But to be honest, there's an album that I personally like more than Songs in the Key of Life, and that's Innervisions. This album released in 1973 to both critical acclaim and commercial success, so I wouldn't really call it underrated in its time, but nowadays I rarely ever see it discussed, especially when compared to Songs in the Key of Life. And honestly, it's just my favorite album he's ever made. In the records that came before this one, Stevie was slowly breaking away from the pop-centric Motown sound that he had become known for, and fought for more creative control over his music, which resulted in his albums being a lot more experimental. I'd say this change started with his 1971 album, Where I'm Coming From, and continued into his next two albums, Music of My Mind and Talking Book. But Innervisions is the album where I feel he fully came into his own as a musician, and it perfects the sounds he was experimenting with in those previous albums. Innervisions is weird, man. Like, really weird, and I mean that in the best way possible. The extensive use of synthesizers was so ahead of its time, and it's hard to believe this album came out in the early 70s. Its sound is so timeless. The first track immediately throws you into the album without warning or even much of an intro, and it's definitely one of the most out there tracks on the record. This is the most scaring the hose song this man has ever put out. Don't Play Too High by Stevie Wonder on the aux. Worst mistake of my life. If you're familiar with Stevie for songs like I Just Called to Say I Love You and you hear Too High, you'll probably wonder what the hell you're listening to. It's this weird fusion of freeform jazz, soul, funk, and blues, and the effects on Stevie's voice give it such a trippy atmosphere, which works perfectly since the song's about drugs. Too High is the best opening track this man has ever made in my opinion, and it's a real highlight on the album. The psychedelic experience of Too High is immediately followed by an acoustic guitar-led ballad, which is a real unexpected direction for this album to go in, but it works surprisingly well. This is probably the prettiest song in the record, as it employs much more tender and soft vocals as well as a pretty simple melody and instrumental. The Rhodes keyboard and the acoustic guitar make for such a transcendent and spacey atmosphere, and the chords used in the track give way for one of the most beautiful progressions in Stevie's entire discography. Visions is an underrated masterpiece.
All things have an ending. A boy's born in hot time, Mississippi.
The radio edit of this track ended up becoming a pretty big hit in its day, but the album version is an entirely different beast. It's 7 minutes long and features an audio stage play in the middle of the track, which depicts a black man being arrested under false charges, which adds to the theme of racial injustice present in the song. There are a fair amount of protest songs written by Stevie, and this is overall one of the most powerful ones in his discography. The synthesizers in the post-chorus are mesmerizing, and the melody that they play is one of the strangest progressions I've ever heard in a song, but it somehow works so well. This song is incredible. Next, we have the piano-led Golden Lady, which definitely has one of the catchiest hooks on the record. The soundscape of this track is so dreamy and colorful. This song is expertly produced and hasn't aged a day since it came out. And something that Stevie likes to do is have his final chorus be super long and employ a multitude of key changes, and that's done expertly on this track. All the instruments work in conjunction to create an absolute spectacle of musical creativity. Definitely another highlight.
Golden lady, I'd like to go there.
This is definitely the most iconic and recognizable song on the album, and it isn't hard to see why. It's an amazingly catchy and fun track that mixes elements of classic rock, soul, and blues to create an extremely unique sound. If you know only one song from this record, it's almost definitely this one. It was a huge hit then, and it's seen as a classic today because, well, it is one. This is yet another political protest song on the album, which employs a powerful message as well as being an absolute banger of a song. The song builds and builds throughout its runtime, and the vocal layering that becomes more and more prevalent throughout the track makes for an incredible and climactic ending to the song. This is probably one of the most underrated songs on the record, and deserves a lot more recognition than it gets. This is one of the best and most melancholic ballads this man has ever written in his career, and one of my all-time favorite songs, not only just from him, but in general. This song is dramatic in the best way possible, and it's legitimately an emotional roller coaster all throughout its runtime. This is some of the best piano work in the entire album, as well as having some of the most emotive and powerful vocals. This song is a musical achievement, and goes down as some of Wonder's best work. And plus, the song really gets me in the feels. After the most emotional and sad song on the record, we get the most hopeful and triumphant song on the record. Following All in Love is Fair with this track makes it a really cathartic experience. It's a real genius move in terms of album sequencing. Overall, this is my favorite song on the album, and it's definitely top 5 in terms of his entire discography. This song is just fun, catchy, and extremely sing-alongable. It really delivers such a positive and hopeful message in its execution, and it's just a classic song. This is most likely my least favorite track on the record, and it's a strange choice for an ending, but it's still a great song nonetheless. This album only being 9 tracks long makes it so there's zero room for filler, so even the worst song on the album is still an 8 out of 10 track. This album ends on a pretty nice note with this simple and fun track with an extremely catchy hook and a great chord progression. It might not be my favorite, but I'd still call it a pretty great song. So that's Innervisions, my personal favorite Stevie Wonder album. Would I say it's better than Songs in the Key of Life? I'm actually not sure. Most of these albums are masterpieces in my view, so it's hard to choose which one's better. If you haven't heard this record, I'd highly recommend it. I feel like it has something for everyone. Anyway, that's enough out of me. Goodbye.